welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. We've got a couple of guests today. Katrina Glogowski, she's an angel investor and attorney in Seattle. We have Laurie, he's an attorney in Vancouver, BC, Canada. They're here to talk to us about the 5 trends that will dominate the cannabis landscape in 2020. Thank you guys for both being here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Josh.
All right, 5 trends that's going to dominate cannabis in 2020. There's been a lot of issues last year, obviously, a lot of capitulation, a lot of issues with the stock market. We all met up at the International Cannabis Business Conference in Vancouver, BC. Issues left and right with a lot of parts in the industry. 2.0 in Canada is exciting. And so the number one thing on this list, top 5, number 1 being the Canadian derivatives launch. So 2.0, for those that don't know, is going to add concentrates and edibles and extracts and other opportunities. But beverages are what, going to be 2.5?
Beverages should have been 2.0, but Canopy ended up delaying the rollout of some of their beverages. So it could be in a few weeks, but most likely it'll be a few months before we'll see legal edible beverages on the market.
So Kronos might have the most to gain. They haven't really touched the flower too much, so they're probably expecting that finally they can start to generate some revenue. We've been able to look at markets from Washington to California now and look at some of that data. Finally, we can have a full view of what the California market or Canada market has to offer with derivatives. What is your expectations with some of the launches? Is it going to go well? Is it going to fumble like it did with the 1.0?
Well, unfortunately, I have to say it's probably going to continue to fumble because despite these labels of cannabis 2.0 and 2.5, the reality is the Prime Minister who's in place at the moment, Justin Trudeau, narrowly got reelected, meaning he's at a minority government, meaning that it'll be very difficult for him to pass any new sweeping laws and amendments that are actually needed to liberalize and get the legal market in the direction that it needs to be. And derivatives are interesting because effectively you take the bud flower and convert it into something else, and that something else can, of course, fetch a higher price on the market, can be used for any other number of applications. And unlike a flower, you have the IP protection and patents and effectively technologies that can become proprietary in the derivatives market that would be a lot harder, and maybe you'll agree with me, Katrina, a lot harder to enforce in the case of botanicals, for example. And so that's where I think we're really just at the infancy of all of this. But the real challenge for the legal market is, of course, dealing with the illegal market. And the problem in Canada is that the rollout of legalization, they set the bar way too high. And instead of incorporating and adopting black market and best practices as Colorado did, they effectively attempted to replace it. And what they've tried to replace with the black market is cannabis that costs twice as much, that's half as good. And folks are voting with their feet by remaining loyal to the illicit market. And so that's why the rollout hasn't gone as well as the authorities would like. But the future of derivatives is, I think, really where the future of the industry is, because effectively you can do a lot with derivatives that you could not do with just cannabis flower.
So Katrina, what's your expectation? Like, do you have a crystal ball prediction about the derivatives launch before we get into number 2, which is the uncertainty surrounding US CBD? What is your expectation with the Canadian derivatives launch?
I think that they are going to have the exact same problem that every other legal state has encountered. There's going to be a rush. You're going to see gummies. You're going to see vape pens. You're going to see chocolates. You're going to see cookies. You're going to see, God help us all, THC-infused leggings, these ridiculous products. But then the market will level out and mature, just like any other market that we have seen. When I was up in Canada, I took a look at some of the gummies, really cute gummy worms, gummy bears, bright colors, animated packaging.
Those would have been all illicit though. When you were in Vancouver in September, legal edibles weren't on the market. And so what you've just highlighted is effectively what the federal government is trying to address: the bright colors, the attractive shapes and flavors, and so on.
Thank you very much, Robert. I had no idea what I was looking at was illicit because I was in a store. So that surprises me. And I was questioning. In fact, I brought it up to my colleagues when I was up there. You know, the bright red gummy bear is banned in Washington and many other states because they're attractive to children. So I was like, how are they doing a bright red gummy bear? Well, now I know, Josh.
Well, an interesting point on edibles, and this is where I think the rubber is going to hit the road with difficulty, is the edibles are capped at 10 milligrams. So I think people are going to be dealing more with issues concerning obesity and sugar intake than they are with respect to issues involving cannabis. And I guess, you know, for the average consumer, 10 milligrams may be just fine. But for a legal medical user, someone with serious debilitating conditions, you know, who may take 100 milligram gummy or 100 milligram brownie, and I mean, who wants to be eating 10 of those? I mean, it's almost like the old Total cereal. You're going to have to eat 10 bowls of cornflakes to get the value of one bowl of Total. And that's going to make it harder for, I think, folks to support the legal market, because if you don't have a product that's actually available, feasible, accessible, getting a cookie from in BC is not an edible is not hard, but trying to create an industry out of that, of course, is something very different.
Let's take a look at number 2 on this list with the Motley Fool: uncertainty surrounding U.S. CBD. So it's number 6 on the top 7 things for the 2020 predictions. So taking a small data set of 6 websites, 67 predictions, aggregating that into 7 points of topic discussions. CBD was number 6 at almost 11% of the predictions, talking about CBD to some degree or another. So there's going to be a lot of uncertainty over production. There's hot CBD. And then, of course, you have the FDA sending out letters for companies as big as Charlotte's Web making claims. So do you guys foresee maybe overproduction and those mom and pop companies that weren't able to differentiate their brand going out of business?
I think the legal CBD market has 2 issues. The first is regulation, the FDA, the USDA, and of course the various state laws, which is problematic across the board. The USDA has announced that they will launch their final regulations on January 29th, which is just next week, after their initial pass at it fell flat on its face. So it's hard to predict if those regulations, as they are currently written, stay in place. The industry is going to have a hard time. And we've discussed before what those are. In the interest of time, I won't go through. The second problem that the CBD market faces is just general business. What's your product? Are you competitive? What's your branding? Where is it being sold? And that's where the overproduction gets into play, and the competition, and the mom and pops are going to struggle. Quite frankly, corporate America, including corporate Canada, is getting into the CBD market. And if you are not competitive, you will not survive. If you want to get your product on the shelf at Costco or Whole Foods, you'd better be a certified facility. You'd better know the products that are going into your ultimate end user product, and they'd better be quality. Otherwise, you're going to fall flat on your face.
Can I add as well? I mean, the CBD market, it baffles me. I was in Hawaii in November, and you go to any Long's drug store or a grocery store, they'll have the CBD center, and it's just wall-to-wall CBD. It's not even full spectrum. And so what I think, let's just take a step back. I think when the market realizes that 95% of what's on the shelves is useless and worthless, because I've represented a lot of illicit players in the cannabis industry over the last number of years. And I'll just give you an analogy here. My dad was diagnosed with stage 1 rectal cancer. I sent him to an address to a farm with effectively the people that taught Rick Simpson how to make Rick Simpson oil, which is the Phoenix tears. And from the group that was behind that, is it, what my understanding is what I learned is you need a certain amount of THC to CBD ratio, depending on the condition and the physiology of the individual, in order for that desired outcome to be made possible from the CBD. Now, I guess taking, CBD, fine, it can't hurt you. But I look at it as, do you want a warehouse full of burlap bags with the head and arms cut out, or do you want a bespoke suit? And the problem is the medicines are not bespoke. And they don't contain active THC, which tells me what are those products actually doing? And is this just really oil that isn't doing much? And I think that's, at the end of the day, a lot of businesses are going to fall, rightly so, on their face, because what they're selling no one needs. It's like when they had moisturizer cream with creatine in it. Like, well, what's the creatine actually do other than people thinking it does something it's not actually doing? And so that, to me, I think there needs to be the right industry to lobby and work with government to say, wouldn't it be nice to be able to actually produce a product, a CBD product, a medical CBD product that contains actually what's needed to do something? And it'll come, but just at the moment, I think people are buying shelves of something that really isn't working. Now, that's not to say that these are bad people and so on, but no, the opposite. They're just doing what they're allowed to under the law. And that's why the law has to change, because what's out there at the moment isn't going to work long-term for anybody. It works now because the blinders are on, but when the blinders are off and folks actually know what is CBD and what are the benefits and how should I be using this, to realize everything we've been told is wrong. And so I guess once that, we got to reconcile that fact with the reality of an industry that's trying to build a house from the third floor down. And, if you don't understand the foundation, it's not going to go too well. And so that's why I'm very optimistic that the outlook will be pessimistic.
A lot of these brands were built on having a THC at a low price point, whereas now it's becoming more about that trusted brand. So I think with bioavailability, looking at full spectrum, once the consumers become educated, they're going to take a look at a 1-to-1 or 20-to-1 CBD to THC ratio, since your CB1, CB2 receptor cells do require a certain amount of CBD and THC in order to fully be absorbed into those receptor cells, other than just kind of floating around the top and doing very mild.
Well, look, when the Stanley brothers can finally produce products that enable them to do a wider variety of treatments, then it'll be amazing. But again, they, like others, are restricted and held back by what the FDA will allow, what the federal government will allow.
And even with all those restrictions, if there's not a push towards profitability, it doesn't matter. So that's number one on the 7 principles behind 2020's predictions. Almost 24% of everybody from these 67 different predictions said that it's going to boil down to price or profit. And so number 3 is a push towards profitability. A lot of issues, tax rates, constant changes with regulations. And yet, if you aren't generating revenue, if you don't have a profit, then you're going to probably be out of business, whether it's cannabis or hemp or otherwise. And so we were saying, like, offline, if some of these LPs up in Canada can't operate for less than $1.74 per gram, that's their break even. They're not going to be around long term, because once the US comes online and places like Colombia and internationally compete, those prices wholesale are going to be a lot less than that $1.74.
Oh, for 100%. Oh, no, 100%. I mean, you got to remember that when Canopy and the big LPs were early on the scene, they were envisaging in their prospectuses grams for $15 to $25. And that was the whole thing, that everyone was expecting that, people should follow the law. They don't. And unlike DMT, for example, cannabis is something that can be grown relatively inexpensively. The barriers to entry are not high. Therefore, there's a substitute. And of course, if you have a substitute and a policy and a legal system that requires that people will actually follow the law for it to work, is the reason why a lot of these companies, their projections have been out of whack. And there was another issue, that a concept called funded capacity, which is what a lot of these large LPs were using to determine their value. And funded capacity meant how much money do you have to fund capacity. So it's almost like the cannabis is equivalent to market accounting, like an Enron. And so to me, this is where these large LPs, some will be just fine, but a lot of the ones that don't have the money and they don't have the deep pockets of either alcohol or tobacco big brother, they're just not going to get access to funds. And so the last 2 or 3 months in Canada, the stocks have hit the deck. I mean, Tilray's stock dipped below to 15 something, which was below their IPO price. And, you know, you ask yourself, should these companies have been valued what they were in the first place? And, you know, you can grow good weed at 36 cents a gram. And ultimately, that's where these big companies are going to need to realize that if they built an industry based on 97 to 98 years of prohibition pricing, then are we expecting to bail them out like the automotive industry when they were like, I got not too big to fail, but too dumb to succeed in some of the regards. And I think Canopy will be just fine. But the further you start going down the chain, is the reality of the situation is like, look, I use the analogy of motorcycles. In 1922, there were over 200 American domestic manufacturers of motorcycles. By 1947, that number contracted to 2, Harley Davidson and Indian. So I think, mark my word, this is like the signs are all there.
At the beginning of the year, we had 100 publicly traded cannabis companies. At the end of 2019, we had 40. That's a 60%.
So this is where now you're seeing acquisition. But, you know, Canopy had a big lead, but whether or not they can maintain that lead will be an interesting story, because they're basically competing with what I call a race to the bottom. They're competing with India, Pakistan, Morocco, Afghanistan, Nicaragua, Colombia, China, India, places like that where, let's face it, you can produce a gram for a lot cheaper. But of course, what we do in Canada is anything produced abroad, like that $5 bottle of Colombia or Cuba rum, it's $55 in the government liquor store. And that's where I think you're going to see Canadian weed be disproportionately available in Canada, where foreign brands, you're going to see a lot more import tariffs eventually to, you know, give the Canadian companies an advantage. But that's just it. The ones that will survive will only do so because they're prepared to engage in a burn rate and have money that others are not prepared to go to. And that's just it. Like Canopy's almost like a sausage into the grinder. The rest of these companies won't survive, and they'll be able to pull out and be just fine. And that's effectively what Canopy and the other ones are doing, is they're trying to buy the market. And the market's now changing and there's competition. And all these projections were made, of course, at a time when the US wasn't even considering legalization. And so Canada was the first. And I don't think they anticipated what would happen when other countries decide, well, we'll create our own markets. What do we need Canadian weed for?
So Katrina, some of these companies might not even make it to U.S. legalization. There's a lot of financing concerns. Ease is looking like they might be running out of money. They had $166 million that they burned through. MedMen, I was saying that there's only going to take a 1% drop in commercial real estate for them to start collapsing. And most recently, there's been some sale leaseback options that have been pretty interesting. I'm not a fan of those. I think that's how Greece got into the European Union from Goldman Sachs. And so it's kind of dirty to have those off-book balance sheet entries. But what is your opinion? We talked about profit. We talked about financing concerns right now. What's your take on the market with the shaky grounds?
People tend to forget that cannabis is a business. And Robert was talking about cost of goods sold. No one can survive with a $15 a gram cost of goods sold. You should be under $1. And if you want to be competitive, you should be looking at Colombia, which is 15 cents a gram. I'm going to sell the world's best bud and I'm going to get $50 a gram for it. Well, good for you. And you're going to be a little micro farmer for the rest of your life. Maybe you'll do good. The second thing is you have to be able to operate as a business with business people like accountants and have spreadsheets. Your example of MedMen is a perfect example. Too big, too fast, and it would not take very much, as we saw with MedMen, to just knock you over. Can they turn it around? Maybe with the right team, maybe not. And a lot of people invested in MedMen, and it's unfortunate. But ultimately, you have to apply solid business practices. Even though it's cannabis, it's still a business. Price. Here in sunny Seattle, there is a gentleman who owns Uncle Ike's, and whatever you personally think about the individual person, he revolutionized the cannabis market in Seattle. He was the first one to do $2 joints. Because guess what? He's a retailer and he wants customers. So $2 joints it is. And that upended the whole market. And if he is retailing a joint, a pre-roll for $2, how much is he buying it for? And when the cones and the tubes and the labor and the actual cannabis in the pre-roll, that's less than 50 cents just to get your product to market. And those $2 pre-rolls are not going away. They're just not. The consumer wants it.
So number 5 on this list, the Motley Fool. Number 5 of 5 trends that'll dominate the cannabis landscape in 2020, shareholder trust. So lastly, expect to see a lot of focus placed on cannabis stocks building trust with investors in the upcoming years. So we kind of mentioned it before that it used to be about what's the highest THC or CBD percentage at the lowest price. And since the vape crisis and since some of these CBD products are going to come back as snake oil, essentially, it's going to be all about trust, whether it's from the consumer or shareholders. We saw some issues with CannTrust dropping a bombshell earlier in July when it was discovered that they had illegally growing cannabis in 5 unlicensed rooms. I think the first one to lose their license was Ascent Industries, Botanical.
Ascent, yep.
Yeah,
you're
Ascent,
right.
Yeah, but what was it?
Ascent Industries.
Yeah, Ascent Industries.
They're really a subsidiary of Agrima Botanicals, right. Ascent Industries.
Yeah. So, looking at, a 62% Fibonacci retracement on the stock market, is it a good time? Is there trust in the marketplace as shareholders? Do you just sit back and wait? What's your take being in Canada? There's publicly traded markets up there. Obviously, is there trust in the marketplace?
Well, I think Mark Twain said it best that, in the context of mining stocks as well, a mine is basically a hole at the bottom with a liar at the top. And that's a great way to describe the capital markets. And Canada, it's been really interesting to see because the Canadian Securities Exchange, which the vast majority of the public companies are listed on, or, the CSE is nothing that spectacular. I mean, it's a few notches above OTC pink sheets. It's the furthest thing from effectively a major, exchange like the Toronto Stock Exchange, for example. The Canadian Securities Administrator, about 2.5 years ago, basically they made a ruling about American companies participating on these senior exchanges. And of course, the TSX and TSX Venture said, listen, we do not want to cause bigger problems with respect to relations with U.S. authorities and financial banking regs. So they basically said, no more listings and American involvement on these exchanges. But the CSE was open for business, and they've never been so popular. And so with that, there's been listings and companies coming to market, and it really has been an incredible era of pump and dump. Because, for all the legitimate companies coming to market and trying to, of course, go through the exercise of going public and raising capital, you've got the whole other derivative industries of effectively people just raising capital, getting money, and in and out. And so there's been huge spikes at least on the West Coast, with a lot of securities fraud. And upon further investigation, they're noticing that, some of the companies that are listed, there's issues regarding proceeds of crime. And I mean, the further and the more you look at this mess, the further and further down the rabbit hole that these folks are going. And so again, investor confidence, shareholder confidence, industry confidence, from my vantage point, there isn't really much of that there. And effectively addressing and remedying that is necessary if there ever is going to be trust. And that is a problem. A lot of these big companies came out to market and they still are gouging the consumer, which is one thing. But if you're gouging the consumer and your quality that you're trying to pass off as Hershey's chocolate isn't Baker's, and it's actually Baker's chocolate, for example, then the customer is going to remember that. And I think shareholders, investors, and market participants, they're kind of fed up, right? Because the whole rollout has been a difficult, uncomfortable failure. And this was what the advocates of legalization, again, the big companies were saying is a good thing. We got to do it this way. And it isn't going so well for them. So I think out of the ashes of this mess, we should have a phoenix of a new industry. And I look at it this way: is, we're not really into the market yet. These are the early days. Maybe we're Friendster going into the MySpace era, but we're nowhere near Facebook yet. I mean, look at it another way. We're maybe in Netscape Navigator. We're near Internet Explorer. And so this industry, I think, is going to have a number of incarnations, and best practice will be determined from different states, different regions, and from that best practice will come. But at the moment, everyone sees Canada as a G7 model, and what Canada effectively did was over-regulate and kneecap itself. But now that model is not going to be an effective export.
I'm no fan of LOIs and blank check companies. Katrina, so how do some of these shareholders establish trust? Like, what's going on in the market from your point of view?
Shareholders and investors generally, they need to know what they're funding.
Yes.
If you are an investor and you do not know the difference between THC and CBD, ask some questions before you write a check. If you are an investor and you do not know the regulatory body over the company that you are investing in, ask some questions. A lot of this information is public record. Does the company you're investing in have any citations for non-compliance?
Due diligence,
absolutely. And so then once you have written a check and you've committed to Katrina's Cannabis, then stay on top of it. Ask questions. Be involved. You don't have to go every day. You don't need an email update every day because you would be hated, but keep track of it. Ask some questions. How do we do this quarter? Have you paid your taxes for 2019? Simple questions that, quite frankly, would apply to any other company. And I would like to say, one of the biggest problems that the cannabis market in the United States faces is the lack of federal legalization. If the United States market was federally legal and you could trade on the stock market, then guess what? The SEC is involved, and there's a lot of rules and regulations about raising money when you start touching the SEC. Having this hybrid legal but not legal, wink, wink, nod, nod, oh, we can't have a bank account, so I can't give you bank statements, is one of the main problems related to this trust issue.
Yep.
And it's a fatal flaw, I think. I do agree with Robert that it will turn around, and you will see the market mature, and you will see good companies come to the top and bad companies go to the bottom, and there will be companies caught up in the middle. But fundamentally, the United States did this to themselves. So,
any last words before we wrap this up?
Any last words? Well, the United States has always been a real international leader when it has come to drug policy. And I think the greatest challenges facing what we need to see reside with the U.S. federal government. I mean, at the end of the day, it was the U.S. federal government that pushed for the single UN conventions and the decriminalization and the scheduling of natural plant medicines, psychedelic medicines, of which cannabis, of course, the persecution for it. And I think the United States and the citizens of the United States have a particular role, because it was your government that effectively has been the global drug police. And until that matter is really addressed, I think we're just going to have various incarnations of a market without the clarity and the certainty which a real industry can be built on. And so I'm excited because these issues will have to be addressed one way or another, but I think it's up to Americans. You do hold your leaders accountable, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed, because that is a big black market, I think, on the wonderful record that the United States as a nation has. And I love the US. I'm a big fan, big supporter. But I think in order to truly turn this industry and other industries around, those laws and those regulations have to be addressed. And I'm confident that with the efforts and the work that I'm seeing, those laws are being lobbied. But they are the default that any government can basically revert to and say what you're doing is illegal. Russia can continue to complain about Canada and Russia and so on about their cannabis internationally. And it would be nice to have those out of the way so that real research and the real developments can finally manifest.
One of the things that I'm looking forward to in 2020, Josh, is Israel. Anyone who has looked at medical research, true medical research, most of it comes out of Israel. And it's been going on for a very long time. And I wonder, quite frankly, about Canada once legalization in Israel comes online. And what is that going to look like in 2020? And what is going to happen if Israel starts exporting and importing and becoming a world player on the market? And can the Canadian LPs compete with Israel and Colombia? I hope they can, and we'll see in 2020.
I'm guessing automation is going to be a trend. Obviously, with price and profit, you're going to have to get a pre-roll machine, because it's not 1880 where you're rolling, cigars with the expense of labor that you can't write off in the U.S. So we'll see what happens with that. Katrina, why don't you tell us who you're with, where people can get a hold of you?
My name is Katrina Glogowski. You want to get a hold of me, you can Google me. I am, in fact, the only Katrina Glogowski on the Google. I have a lot of different projects. I currently work with Kush.com. I work with Kex Trade. I work with FloraFund, Forward Spark, lots of different projects. And I try and stay abreast of the industry, shall we say.
Right. Well, folks can find me. My name's Robert Laurie. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. I'm the principal of Lucem Law Corporation, which is my own law practice. So I have a corporate finance background, but a very special spot for the counterculture. So it's a really interesting practice in that respect. I'm a board advisor to MAPS Canada, which is extremely exciting, and especially at this time. And the last year my day job's cannabis, my night job's been psychedelics. I've been working very closely with Dr. Dennis McKenna, which has been very, very exciting. And folks, I'm easy to reach out. You can find me, and would be delighted to share what I know. Thank you again for having us.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. I want to thank my guest, Katrina Glogowski. She is an angel investor and attorney. I also want to thank Robert Laurie. He's an attorney in Canada. I thank you both for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.